A lot of men who ejaculate more quickly than they would like tend to think that they have an overly sensitive penis. But in reality, it actually has little to do with what's happening in your penis and more with what's happening in a different region of your body. And the truth is that you don't need to desensitize your penis. In fact, you can have a very sensitive penis, which means you can enjoy all kinds of amazing sexual pleasure without ejaculating when you understand how to get to the root of this issue. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into this video. So stick around. I'm Jonathan White, and I've helped thousands of men from around the world, just like you, learn to master their sexual energy and manifest an epic life. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to be the first to know when new content like this drops, and get my free ejaculation control ebook through the link in the description of this video so you can up-level your ejaculation control to legendary levels. So one of the most frequent questions I've been getting from men is, how do I fix an overly sensitive penis? How do I desensitize my penis? And I understand where men are coming from with this question. Personally, when I was first getting into sexual kung fu, I would notice that I'm learning all these techniques, learning how to circulate my sexual energy, control my ejaculation, etc. And there was some days where it felt like no matter what I did, I was just right at the edge of ejaculating. And it felt like there was this sensitivity in my penis that was just urging me right into ejaculation. But over the years, as my training deepened and as my understanding of male physiology improved, I started to be able to get to the root of this issue and understand why this was happening. And what I eventually realized was that it has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening in your penis. And the sensitivity is actually coming from the pelvic floor. It's actually coming from something even deeper than the pelvic floor, but let's start with the pelvic floor for now. So what's happening is that looking at the penis, the male physiology, there's nerves throughout the penis and they connect into the prostate region. There's a specific branch of nerves that connects from the under area of the penis, the frenulum, basically underneath the glands. And I know circumcised men may not always technically have it, but this is the area that triggers this tension response. And so these nerves connect into your pelvic floor. So what happens is when the penis is being stimulated, especially this region, it's sending these signals to the prostate region to contract. And it's that contraction around the prostate, that tension that builds up, and once it hits a maximum threshold, you ejaculate. It triggers that release. And so what seems like penis sensitivity is actually coming from having a baseline of tension in the pelvic floor region. Because if that area is already under contraction, then it takes very little additional signals from the nerves in the penis to go over the edge into ejaculation. Whereas if you're starting from a baseline of complete relaxation, it takes a lot more nervous system signals from sexual stimulation to create that tension response as a buildup towards ejaculation. So therefore, the problem is actually originating from pelvic floor tension patterns, because these nerves that are contracted in your pelvic floor are sending signals through specific vertebrae in your spine up to your brain saying, hey, we need to ejaculate, get this over with. And so if you're a man who appears to have a sensitive penis, I pretty much guarantee that there's an underlying pattern of pelvic floor tension. How do you know if this is the case? Well, next time you're experiencing sexual stimulation or having sex, be hyper aware of your pelvic floor. Notice if when your penis is being stimulated, if it causes this involuntary contraction in your pelvic floor, however subtle. And here's a really simple test you can do to feel this directly. If you rub this underside of the penis, the frenulum area, while paying attention to your pelvic floor, you can even place fingers of your other hand on your pelvic floor as you rub your frenulum. Notice if there's a contracting response in your pelvic floor. And by feeling this directly, you'll understand more the mechanism that's happening here. And then you can become much more aware of it, because this process is happening for pretty much all men, but most of them are completely unaware of it. And so to address this issue of penis sensitivity that's making you ejaculate quickly, you want to address this involuntary contraction that's happening in your pelvic floor. Because if you can get rid of that and keep your pelvic floor relaxed during sex, your penis will no longer feel so sensitive and you'll have really good ejaculation control. But it gets even deeper than that. There's something beyond the pelvic floor, and that is the state of your nervous system. Because any tension response in the body is usually arising from the fight or flight response in your nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system. And so usually this is at its root a mental, psychological pattern, one of stress, tension, nervousness, shame, guilt, there's often all these triggers, all these charges that we have around sexual experience due to things that happened earlier on in life. You know, I get it. We're not usually introduced to sex and sexuality in the most educated way. And so inevitably we run into embarrassing and shameful experiences, and we hold on to these in our mind. And so when you go into sex, you're in a state of tension, a mental and psychological tension, and you probably aren't even aware of this. But that tension in your mind starts to cause tension in your body. It's always connected. And this usually manifests as tension in the diaphragm area, you know, shallow, tense breathing, and the pelvic floor contracts. I remember as I was getting into this work, when I was starting to understand what I'm telling you about here, about these, you know, past experiences that can shape our current response to things, I had a memory of being very young child, and I loved to be naked. Like, there was just something sensual to me about being naked. Like, I loved it, but it wasn't really an acceptable thing to do. You know what I mean? To just be naked. And so I couldn't do it all the time, but I would find these periods where I could be naked. And I remember one night sleeping in my bed, and I took my clothes off and slept naked. And it was like, oh, it was like the most, you know, I was quite young, but it was this like sensual, sexual, orgasmic experience. It just felt so like, ooh. And when I woke up in the morning, my mom had come in the room and I was naked, and it was obvious I was naked. I remember like hiding behind the door and just feeling extremely ashamed. And a lot of my early sexual experiences with women, I felt extremely self-conscious about my body. Like, I didn't want my penis to ever be seen if it wasn't in an erect state. Just all this like hang-ups I had. And I remember when I started to become aware of these patterns, I was like, wow, you know, how my early experiences shaped my sexual response, and I wasn't even aware of it. And it was creating all these contractions and stressful stories and ideas. And it was causing me to have a hard time enjoying sex and just, you know, feel good about my body. And so letting go of all these things allowed me to completely liberate my sexual experience, because my nervous system was no longer in a state of, oh fuck, during sex, essentially. So correcting the nervous system thing, you know, that's a whole subject in itself. And I'm gonna give you some resources at the end of this video for that. But what I will say right now is the most helpful thing for keeping yourself in a balanced, calm, parasympathetic-based nervous system state is to breathe from your belly. Smooth, deep belly breathing. Because here's the thing. When you go into a state of tension, the mind starts to wander. You start to think about, uh-oh, what's going to happen? And you're reminiscing on things that happened before. Your mind is no longer in the present moment. It's disconnected from your body. So by becoming aware of your breath, it gives you something to anchor to, something to keep your presence grounded in the moment. And this helps you get out of the head and gives you something to focus on. And slow, deep belly breathing helps you to stay dominant in your parasympathetic nervous system, staying cool and grounded. And this leads me to something which I found quite fascinating when I discovered this, which is the state of your erection. The hardness of your penis actually makes a huge difference into how sensitive your penis feels, so to speak, this contraction response I was talking about. The harder your dick is, the more erect it is, the more blood pressure that there is, you know, the more hydraulic pressure in your penis, the less sensitive this frenulum area becomes to have this constant contraction in your pelvic floor. What I realized was that whenever my penis was in a not fully erect state, when it was semi-flaccid, I would feel a heightened tension response to stimulation in my pelvic floor. Like stimulation on the penis, I would feel that as a hyper tense response in the pelvic floor. And so basically, the harder you can get, the less sensitive your penis is going to become in a certain sense. Now, this isn't like completely black or white. It doesn't mean that whenever you're fully erect, you're gonna have zero difficulties controlling ejaculation. There's many factors, but just in general, the harder that you are, the easier it's going to be to control your ejaculation. I found this to be true. And I recommend you check out a video I made last year, which is called A Comprehensive Guide to Overcoming Erectile Dysfunction, for all kinds of advice about improving erection quality. But I feel like I really must mention some extremely counterproductive things, almost self-destructive things men do to try to overcome what they believe is penis sensitivity. There's some teachers that actually will tell you to do penis desensitizing exercises, things like basically rub your dick on like a rough textured cloth or like denim or something like that, or like smack it constantly to desensitize the nerves. And, you know, on a superficial level coming into this, it's like, oh, sure, yeah, my penis is too sensitive, so if I lessen the sensitivity, I won't ejaculate. But when you understand the physiology of the penis and everything I've just talked about, then you'll understand that this approach is stupid. It makes no sense and it's counterproductive, because if you truly lose penis sensitivity, you're gonna have a hard time feeling pleasure. You're going to have a hard time maintaining erections. And this is counterproductive to our whole goal in sexual kung fu, which is to enjoy sex at some level. And numbing an area of the body from excessive stimulation would maybe be implying that there's a degree of nerve damage there. And the last thing you want to do is create nerve damage in your penis. Another common thing men will do is use numbing creams. And what you choose to do, I don't care. You can do whatever you want. I'm not saying what's right or what's wrong, but in my mind, it's like, again, how can you enjoy sex if you can't feel your dick? You know what I'm saying? And so to me, the obvious thing to do is to get to the root of the issue. You can actually have an extremely sensitive penis. In my opinion, it's the best thing to do is to have a more sensitive penis, because you will be more sensitive to stimulation. You will feel more sexual pleasure, and sensitivity in the penis does not correlate to an enhanced ejaculation response. It's the sensitivity of the tension response you have in your pelvic floor, which is what dictates your ability to last longer. And if you'd like to see a video on how to retrain your pelvic floor to stay relaxed during sex, let me know in the comments below. So now what I want you to do is to watch a video I made, which is about balancing your pelvic floor to overcome premature ejaculation and improve your erection. So I'll put a link to that video. You'll gain a better understanding of pelvic floor hypertension patterns and how to overcome them, so you can last longer in bed. And again, definitely get my free ejaculation control ebook. It will give you exercises to develop legendary ejaculation control. Give this video a like. If you know someone who's struggling with premature ejaculation, send this video to them. Make sure you hit subscribe and have a great day, my friend.